June 4, 1942, Midway Atoll, Pacific Ocean. The dawn light is pale and glassy, turning the waves to molten silver. Inside the belly of a new, untested torpedo bomber, Ensign Albert Burt Ernest wipes sweat from his palms and glances toward his rear gunner, J. Manning. The aircraft vibrates beneath them, heavy, solid, louder than the sleek, agile dive bombers ahead. It's the Grumman TBF Avenger, the Navy's newest hope. But this morning, they fly without a carrier to return to. The USS Hornet's deck is too crowded, and so they've launched from Midway's tiny airstrip, a ragged line of 6 Avengers, green, ungainly machines armed with the obsolete Mark 13 torpedo and the quiet dread of inexperience. Engines roar in unison as they climb into the low Pacific haze. Below, Midway's defenders, Marines and Navy men, brace for the onslaught they know is coming. Above them, Japanese carrier planes sweep toward the island in tight, beautiful formations. To the men of the Imperial Navy, the sky is their domain. They've spent years perfecting their art aboard ships like Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu. Their A6 dance through the air like dragonflies. And to them, the sight of the Tubby new American torpedo bomber, thick fuselage, slow climb, wide wings, is a joke. "Easy meat," one pilot reportedly laughed when he first saw the Avengers in reconnaissance photos. A fat duck with a torpedo. But what happens next will be written in the blood and smoke of Midway's crucible. By 0700 hours, the 6 Avengers are already pushing toward the enemy fleet, 150 miles out. Their orders are simple, almost suicidal. Find and attack the Japanese carriers. No fighter escort, no backup, no knowledge of the precise location, just courage and a target somewhere beyond the horizon. The Avenger's cockpit is cramped and hot. Oil mist collects on the windscreen. Manning grips the twin 30-caliber guns in the dorsal turret. Radioman Third Class Harry Ferrier monitors the radio, his young face pale. He's 17, his first combat mission. The sea below shimmers in deceptive calm. Then, black dots on the horizon. The Japanese fleet. "Targets in sight," Ernest whispers into the intercom. His voice is steady, but his heart pounds against his ribs. He drops altitude to sea-skimming height, barely 50 feet above the waves. The Avengers spread out, a loose, determined wedge. But the Japanese lookouts have already spotted them. Alarms blare across the decks of Akagi and Kaga. Within seconds, Zeros scream into the sky, their engines keening like hornets. The first tracers cut through the formation, white-hot threads of death. Ferrier hears them crack past the fuselage, feels the vibration of hits on the wings. A round shatters the canopy behind him. Shards of glass slice his cheek. The sky erupts in chaos. Manning fires back, swinging his turret hard left. "I've got one on us!" he yells, but it's hopeless. The Zeros are too fast, too agile. One Avenger explodes ahead of them, shearing into the ocean in a burst of flame and spray. Another limps on, smoking. Ernest keeps his eyes on the horizon. "Hold it together," he murmurs. "We're not turning back." They close to within a mile of the carrier. Tracers pour upward like fountains. The air smells of bringing oil, cordite, salt. Ernest arms his torpedo, lines up the run, and drops to 50 feet. The altimeter trembles. Steady, steady. He releases the weapon. The torpedo splashes into the sea, its wake carving a perfect silver line toward Kaga's hull, but it veers, detonating too early, a premature burst that rocks the bomber with shock waves. Ernest curses, pulling up hard. The Avenger groans as rounds punch through its wings. Manning's guns chatter in reply. A Zero rakes them from behind. Manning jerks violently. slumping forward. "Tail gunner's hit!" Ferrier shouts. Ernest doesn't look back. The controls are sluggish. The right wing is leaking fuel. He banks toward a rain squall, desperate to escape. Another burst hits the belly. Instruments flicker, die. But somehow the engine keeps coughing forward. Ferrier can barely hear through the roar. Of 6 Avengers that left Midway, 5 are lost. Ernest's bullet-riddled aircraft limps home alone, hydraulics gone, radio destroyed, 1 man dead, the other barely conscious. He belly lands on Midway, the landing gear collapsing in a shower of sparks. The ground crews rush forward. Ferrier stumbles out, blood running down his face. Ernest's eyes are red from smoke. Behind them, Manning still and silent. 1 survivor crew out of 6. Yet within the wreckage lies something more powerful than defeat. The Avenger has proven it can take punishment no other plane could. Shot to pieces, leaking fuel, riddled with over 70 bullet holes, and still airborne. The legend of the Ironworks, as pilots would soon call Grumman aircraft, is born that day on Midway. That night, under a blood-red sunset, mechanics walk around the battered survivor, running fingers along jagged holes and splintered control surfaces. A Navy photographer snaps a picture, the Avenger's broad, scarred fuselage gleaming in the light. To some, it looks ungainly. To others, it looks indestructible. In the Yamato wardroom aboard Akabe, officers review combat reports. The air commander reads the losses with satisfaction. 6 torpedo bombers destroyed, 1 damaged beyond use. No threat, he concludes. He doesn't realize it yet, but this Tubby Avenger will soon become the most numerous and deadly torpedo aircraft of the war, outlasting the very carriers that mock it today. At Midway, it had its baptism by fire. The lessons learned here about armor, about endurance, about courage will echo across the Pacific for the next 3 years. The Avenger is not fast, it is not elegant, but in the hands of young, determined crews, it will become the silent hammer of the American fleet, sinking destroyers, cruisers, and even carriers by the dozen. Summer 1942. Pearl Harbor's airfields still bear the scars of December's attack, but in hangars and workshops from Hawaii to Bethpage, New York, something new is stirring. Engineers at Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation pore over bullet-riddled sheets of aluminum. Photographs of wrecked TBFs from Midway spread across their drafting tables. The Avenger's first blood has been drawn and analyzed. The reports are brutal. Out of 6 aircraft launched, 5 never returned. The Mark 13 torpedo had failed, detonating prematurely or veering off target. The pilots were brave, but they'd been sent almost blind into a wall of Zero fighters and anti-aircraft fire. Yet for all that, something remarkable stands out. The lone surviving Avenger, flown by Albert Ernest, had limped home through the impossible. Eugene Wilson, Grumman's chief engineer, stands beside the battered fuselage back at the factory. 76 holes, he murmurs, tracing a finger along a torn section of wing. 76, and she still flew. The men around him, designers, welders, inspectors, nod in silence. Grumman's nickname, the Ironworks, is no boast. It's a badge of honor. Wilson turns to his team. If this bird can take that beating, we'll make her stronger yet. Bethpage, Long Island, late 1942. In the heart of the Grumman plant, sparks fly and rivet guns thunder. Women in overalls, part of the wartime Rosie Wave, assemble control surfaces and torpedo bays. Engineers reinforce armor plating around the cockpit and vital systems. The Avenger's design philosophy crystallizes into a mantra. Survive first, strike second, and return to fight again. Pilots begin to notice small but critical details: thick, self-sealing fuel tanks, a robust hydraulic system, and an internal bomb bay that protects ordnance until the moment of release. Its Wright R2600 engine, capable of 1,700 horsepower, hums with a reassuring steadiness. It's not glamorous, but in the unforgiving world of naval aviation, glamour doesn't win wars. Endurance does. Flight Instructor Lieutenant Commander Tom Tex Blackburn of Torpedo Squadron 8, VT-8, watches a row of Avengers warming up for a training sortie at Norfolk. The aircraft shake the tarmac with deep, throaty growls. He turns to a young ensign beside him. "She's a brick," the ensign mutters. "Yeah, and a brick that'll still be flying when your fancy Zero's out of gas." He's not wrong. The Avenger's size hides its secret: range. With extra fuel tanks and efficient cruising power, it can strike targets far beyond earlier torpedo planes. And with a crew of 3, pilot, turret gunner, and radio man, it can do the work of a small ship in the sky: scout, attack, and survive. USS Essex, 1943. The Pacific Turns. The Essex-class carriers stretch across the ocean like floating cities, each housing air groups of fighters, dive bombers, and torpedo planes. On the deck of USS Essex, Avengers roll forward one after another, their torpedoes gleaming under the morning sun. The pilots have trained hard, learning to approach low and fast, barely 100 feet above the waves, before launching at point-blank range. Their torpedoes are no longer reliable relics. The Mark 13 has been re-engineered: new fins for stability, better detonators, and improved depth controls. Test drops in San Diego Bay have yielded consistency for the first time. In the ready room, Lieutenant Charles or Charlie Nelson of Torpedo Squadron 9 briefs his men before their first stripe on Japanese shipping near Marcus Island. Cigarette smoke curls toward the low ceiling as he traces the route with a pencil. "Keep your altitude low, boys, under radar. Approach from the sun. If they see you, you're done." Someone jokes about the plane's shape again: the flying barrel. Laughter ripples, nervous but real. Nelson smirks. "They can laugh all they want. Just remember, barrels float. Zeros don't." They take off into the rising light, engines thundering in synchrony. Below them, the blue of the Pacific stretches endlessly, the same sea that swallowed the men of Midway. But this time, the Avengers aren't alone. Wildcats and Hellcats fly escort, slicing through the sky above them. Fighter cover, something Midway's pilots never had. Hours later, the formation finds its prey: a convoy of Japanese freighters and destroyers winding through a chain of atolls. The Avengers descend in a wide arc, flak puffs blooming around them like dark flowers. Torpedo bays open. The sea rushes up. "Steady, now!" One by one, torpedoes drop, sleek silver trails slicing toward the ships. The first finds a target, a destroyer, Hokaze, rolling violently as the explosion tears through her midsection. Columns of water rise hundreds of feet high. Flames burst from her bow. The radio crackles. "Direct hit! Direct hit!" On the carrier, the message is received with quiet satisfaction. The Avengers have drawn blood, and, more importantly, they've come home. All aircraft recovered. The Tubby bomber has just earned its place in the Navy's arsenal. The Japanese perspective. In Tokyo's naval staff offices, intelligence reports describe the new Grumman torpedo bomber as formidable. Pilots returning from the Solomons speak of a plane that simply refuses to die. One Zero pilot notes, "hits from cannon shells and it continues flying." Another writes that its turret covers every direction.
The laughter that once greeted the Avenger's silhouette fades. Its thick armor and rear turret are no longer punchlines, they're problems. The Imperial Navy begins to adapt. Escorts are ordered to widen defensive formations. Anti-aircraft guns are doubled on key vessels. Pilots are warned to attack from below, where the Avenger's guns can't reach easily. But with each engagement, more Japanese ships vanish beneath the waves. The tables are turning, and the Allies know it. By the end of 1943, Avengers have flown hundreds of missions from the Coral Sea to the Gilberts. Their bomb bays carry not only torpedoes, but bombs, depth charges, and sonobuoys. They serve as scouts, submarine hunters, and night raiders. On paper, they're attack aircraft. In reality, they're symbols of persistence, a blend of engineering grit and human determination. Back in the hangars at Pearl Harbor, mechanics paint fresh kill markings on the fuselages, silhouettes of ships, submarines, and transports. Each one tells a story. Each one is a small revenge for Midway. Somewhere in the Pacific night, a Japanese officer stares across the black ocean from a destroyer's deck. The sea is calm, the stars bright. Then faintly, he hears it. The deep, resonant growl of engines overhead. It's a sound he's learned to fear. The Avengers have found them again.
November 19th, 1943. Tarawa Atoll, Gilbert Islands. The dawn sky is the color of bruised steel. On the flight deck of the USS Bunker Hill, Avenger crews huddle beneath the howl of engines and the salty wind. The sea below them churns with landing craft, Marines packed shoulder to shoulder, waiting for their turn to storm the coral beaches of Betio. Lieutenant Junior Grade George H.W. Bush checks his flight plan, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the heavy responsibility that comes with his first real combat strike. He's 20 years old, barely out of Yale, now commanding a 3-man crew in a TBF Avenger armed with a single 2,000-pound bomb. His gunner, Radio Man Second Class John Delaney, and turret man Lieutenant Junior Grade William White give thumbs up as they strap in. The deck officer signals. Engines roar. The carrier shudders as Bush's Avenger hurtles down the deck, the tailhook releasing with a violent snap. The plane lurches skyward into the gray Pacific dawn. Their target? Japanese defensive positions on Tarawa. Pillboxes carved into coral, guns hidden beneath palm roots, a fortress that's already turning the lagoon red with marine blood. The Avenger's cockpit rattles as it descends into flak bursts. The bomb bay doors groan open. "Hold steady," Bush mutters, sweat running into his eyes. He lines up the crosshairs on a cluster of bunkers at Red Beach. Below, the lagoon is littered with landing craft, many stuck on the reef, Marines wading through chest-deep water under withering fire. "Bombs away!" The Avenger bucks as the 2,000-pounder drops, vanishing through a gray haze. A second later, impact. A shock wave ripples upward, a column of dust and flame rising through the smoke. Marines on the beach cheer instinctively, though most never even see the plane above. Bush pulls the Avenger up sharply, leveling off at 2,000 feet. "Let's go again!" From ship to shore, Avengers circle in relentless rotation, striking strong points, strafing supply dumps, even dropping small bombs to clear lanes for advancing Marines. Their low passes are met with small arms fire, tracers whipping past the fuselage. But the TBF's armor shrugs off much of the punishment. By the end of the first day, hundreds of sorties pound Tarawa's defenses. The Avengers return to their carriers smudged with oil and coral dust, their wings pitted with shrapnel. They've flown longer and hit harder than any previous torpedo aircraft could have imagined. Aboard Akagi's old successor, the Zuikaku, Japanese observers intercept the radio chatter. "These new American bombers, they do not stop." He's right.
The Tubby Grumman has become the hammer of the fleet. Night over the Marshall Islands, February 1944. A dark, moonless sky. Somewhere above the atolls of Kwajalein, a formation of Avengers flies in eerie silence. Each plane carries radar, primitive by modern standards, but revolutionary for its time. The operators watch glowing dots move slowly across cathode screens. "Contact, bearing 240, a radio man whispers. The pilot nods. "Let's pay them a visit." Below, a Japanese convoy plows eastward. 3 cargo ships, 1 small destroyer escort. They never see the Avengers coming. At 1,500 feet, the Avengers descend. Their engines rumble low over the water. A lookout shouts in Japanese, but too late. 3 torpedoes slip beneath the waves. Seconds later, geysers of water erupt as explosions tear through steel hulls. The Avengers vanish into the night, unseen ghosts over the Pacific. The once mocked machine has evolved beyond the imagination of its designers. No longer just a torpedo bomber. It's a radar scout, a submarine hunter, a night strike platform. It's the backbone of the Navy's offensive power. And soon it will face its greatest test yet. June 19th, 1944, the Philippine Sea. It's just after dawn aboard the USS Belleau Wood. 1,000 miles from the nearest coast, the sky is streaked with white contrails. The greatest carrier battle in history is beginning. Pilots and deck crews call it the Marianas Turkey Shoot. From the Japanese carriers Taiho, Shokaku, and Zuikaku, hundreds of aircraft launch in desperate waves. Zeros, Vals, Judys, all still flown by brave men, but men less trained than their predecessors. Across the horizon, they meet the wall of steel and fire that the U.S. Navy now commands. F-66 Hellcats, 5-inch guns, and the deadly coordination of radar-directed defenses. And then, through the haze, the Avengers move in. Lieutenant Commander Robert Bob Campbell leads VT-15 off Essex, flying low beneath the storm of aerial combat. Their Avengers carry torpedoes aimed at Japan's carrier fleet. Above them, Hellcats slash through enemy formations. Campbell's voice comes through the intercom. "Keep tight! 1 run! Make it count!" As they near the Japanese task force, black bursts of flak fill the sky. A wall of fire. The Avengers plow through it. "Pick your target! Shokaku!" Campbell dives to sea level, the surface rushing up. A heartbeat later, he releases. The torpedo streaks away, its wake flashing silver. It strikes the Shokaku midships. The explosion blows plates off her side, flames tearing across her hangar deck. Fuel lines ignite. Within minutes, the carrier is a floating inferno. Elsewhere, another torpedo finds the fleet carrier Taiho, which later explodes after aviation fuel fumes ignite below deck. When the smoke clears, Japan's carrier force, once the pride of the empire, is crippled beyond recovery. More than 400 Japanese aircraft are lost in a single day. The Tubby Avenger, lumbering and slow, has just helped destroy the heart of the Imperial Navy. That evening, as the sun sets over the Philippine Sea, the decks of the American carriers glow red under dimmed battle lights. Pilots eat quietly, too tired to celebrate. On the radio, Admiral Raymond Spruance's calm voice announces the victory. In the maintenance bay, a mechanic pats the bullet-scarred flank of an Avenger. "She brought him home again," he mutters. A petty officer nearby nods. "It's funny, isn't it? They laughed at her once." He smiles faintly. "Not anymore." Above the ocean, the sky still smells faintly of corderite and burning oil. Beneath the waves, the ghosts of Taiho and Shokaku drift down into the dark. The Avenger has claimed its place in history, not as the fastest nor the prettiest, but as the most relentless. And for Japan's airmen and sailors, that name, TBF Avenger, will soon mean only one thing: no escape.
March 14th, 1945, Remagen, Germany. The Ludendorff Bridge stands in the dawn mist like a wounded beast, blackened, twisted, and trembling from the strain of its own legend. For 7 days it has carried the weight of an army. Now every bolt, every girder, every rivet groans under the pressure. Down by the western abutment, Lieutenant Colonel Clayton Rust of the 276th Engineer Combat Battalion watches as another convoy of Shermans rumbles onto the span. He checks his watch. 30 tons each, he murmurs, and she has got a crack running through the lower cord that looks like it's ready to snap. His assistant, Captain Murray Devers, looks up at the towering steel arches, smoke still drifting from near misses the night before. Sir, if that bridge holds one more day, it's a miracle. Above them, welders in goggles and harnesses climb the structure like ship-riggers, hammering steel plates into place, tightening bolts, patching beams shorn by artillery. Each time a bomb explodes nearby, the bridge quivers like a tuning fork, showering rust flakes into the river below. Engineers have begun to call her the Iron Giant. They work without sleep, driven by equal parts fear and awe. At 10 a.m. the German bombardment resumes. Heavy railway guns hidden near Linz thunder, their shells screaming across the river. One round strikes the eastern approach, obliterating a truck column in a flash of flame. Another lands short, sending a geyser of water over the girders. Men on the deck flattened against the steel floor. "Keep moving," a sergeant bellows. "Don't stop for anything." Despite the chaos, the traffic continues. Endless columns of men, tanks, jeeps, ambulances, fuel trucks. The bridge has become a conveyor of war, feeding the Allied advance deep into the heart of Germany. Overhead, the Luftwaffe appears again. A handful of FW-19s dart through the clouds, dropping bombs that splash harmlessly into the river. American flak gunners fire until their barrels glow. The sky fills with black bursts and tracer lines, each gunner silently praying that no bomb finds its mark. In the command dugout near the western pier, Major General John W. Leonard pores over situation maps. An aide rushes in with a fresh report. "Sir, engineers say the bridge is unstable. They recommend closing it for heavy traffic." Leonard rubs his temples. "We can't. The 99th still has armor to cross. If we stop the flow, we lose momentum, and the Germans will regroup." He hesitates, then adds softly, "But warn everyone on that bridge to keep their heads down. If she goes, she'll take half of them with her." The Americans know it. Every man crossing glances uneasily at the trembling girders, listening to the rhythmic creak beneath his boots. The air smells of oil and hot metal. Drivers keep engines in low gear, rolling at a crawl, eyes fixed on the far shore. The bridge shakes violently each time a tank passes over, like the heartbeat of something alive and overworked. At 2:20 p.m., Lieutenant Colonel Rust receives a radio call from one of his engineers positioned on the eastern tower. "Sir, the arch is bowing. We're hearing cracking sounds near the main truss." Rust snatches up his field phone and shouts, "Clear the bridge! All personnel off!" But the order comes seconds too late. At 3 p.m., a thunderous metallic groan reverberates through the valley, deep and low, like a ship's hull tearing apart underwater. Witnesses on both banks look up to see the bridge shudder violently. A huge cloud of rust and dust bursts from the central arch. For one surreal heartbeat, the entire span seems to hang suspended in the air. Then the western approach buckles. Steel beams twist like ribbon. Cables snap with gunshot cracks. Men on the deck scream as the roadway pitches downward. Tanks and trucks slide toward the river, tumbling into the water with a roar. In less than 20 seconds, the Ludendorff Bridge, the miracle of Remagen, is gone. On the western bank, Colonel Leonard stands frozen, binoculars pressed to his eyes. "Dear God," he whispers. Around him, stunned silence, broken only by the sound of collapsing girders echoing down the river valley. When the dust clears, all that remains are the 2 skeletal towers and jagged fragments of steel jutting from the water like broken bones.
Rescue boats race onto the river, pulling survivors from the icy current. Some men cling to floating beams, others are gone before anyone can reach them. In total, 28 American engineers and soldiers are killed in the collapse, with dozens more injured. Many had worked on the bridge since the moment of its capture. The men on the shore remove their helmets in silent respect as bodies are lifted from the water. That evening, word spreads through the ranks. The bridge is down, but the bridgehead stands. The Americans have already established 2 sturdy pontoon bridges and a heavy steel treadway nearby. The river crossing endures. The loss of the Ludendorff hurts, but it cannot undo what has been achieved. From his headquarters, General Eisenhower receives the news. For a moment he simply stares at the report. Then he sets it down and says, almost to himself, "That bridge did its job." Indeed it had. In 10 days, the Ludendorff had carried over 25,000 men, thousands of vehicles, and endless tons of supplies across the Rhine. It had turned a boundary into a highway. Its collapse was tragic, but its purpose had been fulfilled. Across Germany, the shockwaves reach even the Wehrmacht High Command. Field Marshal Kesselring fumes when told the Americans still hold the bridgehead. "They've already crossed! Now they'll never stop!" For the first time, senior officers begin to admit what many have privately feared: the war is lost. As dusk settles, the Rhine glows with reflections of fire and steel. The broken arches of the Ludendorff rise from the water like the ribs of a giant, silhouetted against the smoke-filled sky. Nearby, bulldozers continue to work, pushing forward the construction of new bridges. The roar of machinery fills the night, mingling with the distant thunder of artillery. For the men who lived through those 10 days, Remagen becomes more than a battle. It is a symbol of speed, courage, and the relentless momentum that would carry the Allies all the way to the Elbe. Private Walter Riley, now resting in a trench on the eastern shore, looks across the dark water at the wreckage and mutters to no one in particular, "We crossed the Rhine, and she carried us the whole way." His buddy just nods, silent. Somewhere behind them, the rumble of engines grows again. Another convoy heading east, another day closer to the end. March 25th, 1945. The bridgehead at Remagen has grown to over 25 square miles. Thousands of prisoners stream in daily. American flags flutter on both banks. The Rhine barrier, once the pride of Germany's defense, has been breached beyond repair. And though the Ludendorff lies silent beneath the current, its legacy endures in every man who crossed it and every mile conquered beyond. The Iron Giant had fallen, but in falling, it carried an army to victory.
Autumn 1945. Okinawa's airstrips lie silent. The smoke that once rose daily from burning ships now drifts away into clean, humid air. Rows of Avengers, their fuselages still patched with field repairs, sit idle in neat ranks under the tropical sun. The men who flew them pack duffel bags and stare at the sea, uncertain what comes next. The war is over. But the Avenger, the ugly duckling of the Navy's air arm, has one last flight ahead, not of war, but of memory. Pearl Harbor Naval Air Station, October 1945. The hangar doors groan open as mechanics roll out an Avenger marked with faded mission symbols, silhouettes of ships, bombs, and submarines painted across its nose. Its engine coughs once, twice, then roars to life, echoing through the steel cavern. Commander Albert Ernest, the same man who 3 years earlier had limped home from Midway in a bullet-riddled prototype, climbs into the cockpit. He runs his gloved hand along the worn instrument panel. "Old girl still breathes," he says quietly. "She's earned her rest." A small crowd gathers, young sailors, mechanics, even civilians. For many, it's the first time they've seen an Avenger up close.
They're struck not by its beauty, but by its presence. Broad shoulders, low stance, that purposeful curve of wings that seem to say, I was built to carry men into hell and bring them home again. Ernest throttles up. The propeller blurs, the plane begins to roll, and for a moment, time folds back. Midway, the Solomons, the Philippine Sea, all compressed into the growl of a single engine fading into the Hawaiian sky. The civilian years. In the years that follow, thousands of Avengers are decommissioned or sold off, yet their story refuses to fade. Converted TBM-3s find new life spraying crops, fighting forest fires, towing targets, and mapping coastlines. Some become bush planes in the far north, others training aircraft for the post-war generation. And then there are those that never leave service. The U.S. Navy transforms hundreds of them into TBM-3W early warning aircraft, the first to carry rotating radar domes on their bellies, precursors to the modern AWACS. What once hunted ships and submarines now hunts storms and signals. The Avenger becomes a bridge between the piston age and the jet age, proof that good design transcends its moment. Personal legacies. For the men who flew her, the Avenger remains a symbol not of killing, but of endurance. Former Torpedo bomber pilots reunite in the 1950s at Grumman's Airfield on Long Island. They walk among a row of preserved aircraft, hands tracing rivets as if greeting old comrades. One of them, George H.W. Bush, stands beside a TBM painted with his old squadron's insignia. He runs a hand along the tail, the same type he'd flown when shot down near Chichijima in 1944. His gunner and radio man never made it back. Bush did. And decades later, he'll still speak of the Avenger not as a machine, but as a friend that refused to quit on him. She was strong, he tells a reporter quietly. She was forgiving, and she gave you hope that maybe, just maybe, you'd live to see tomorrow. For thousands of crews, that sentiment became gospel. The Avenger wasn't about glamour, it was about grit. About climbing into a cockpit heavy with armor and trust, knowing the odds and flying anyway. A Japanese reflection. Across the Pacific, former Japanese pilots gather in post-war Tokyo. Many now drive streetcars or teach in quiet schools. One of them, a graying former Zero pilot named Hiroshi Takada, writes a memoir titled Wings Over a Lost Empire. In one passage, he recalls his first encounter with the Avenger during the Battle of the Philippine Sea. We thought them clumsy. We were wrong. Their bullets came from everywhere, their gunners unafraid. I saw one burning, its engine trailing smoke, still diving straight at our fleet. It released its torpedo before crashing. That courage was not human. It belonged to a machine that refused to die. His words echo through time, a tribute from one warrior to another. A symbol of transformation. By the early 1950s, the world is entering a new kind of war. Jets scream across Korea, missiles replace torpedoes. Yet at air shows from California to Sydney, when an old TBF lifts off, its deep radial engine still silences crowds. Children cover their ears, veterans look up, eyes glistening. The plane that once represented destruction now symbolizes survival. In museums, Pensacola, Midway, Chino, Avengers rest beneath spotlights, their paint faded, their canopies scarred. Visitors lean close to read the small brass plaques that list their missions. Some realize for the first time that the men who flew these were often barely 20 years old. On one aircraft at the National Naval Aviation Museum, a line of white lettering along the fuselage reads, "She brought them home." Epilogue. The Sound of the Sea and the Sky. April 1972. A restored Avenger named Doris May flies low along the Pacific coast near Monterey. Its pilot, a retired Navy commander, glances down at the rolling surf and smiles. His co-pilot, a young man born long after the war, asks, "Why do you still fly her, sir?" The old man taps the throttle gently. "Because she still has stories left to tell." The plane banks over the water, sunlight glinting off the wings. Below, the ocean glows the same silver hue it did at Midway 30 years earlier. The sound of the engine rolls out across the waves, steady, defiant, eternal. And if you listen closely, you can almost hear the ghosts of those first 6 Avengers flying out into the dawn of June 4th, 1942. 6 men against an empire and 1 airplane that refused to give up. From that morning forward, every Japanese pilot who once laughed at the Tubby torpedo bomber would come to know a different truth. The Avenger did not need to look beautiful to make history. It only needed to endure. And endure it did, in steel, in smoke, and in the hearts of the men who flew her.